Sometimes the most profound ideas come from the unlikeliest of places. So, what if I told you that a gritty little sci fi story about a space smuggler is actually one of the deepest theological texts of its time? Yeah, I know, it sounds a little out there, but trust me. Today, we're going to peel back the layers of Thief of Mars, and what we'll find is this incredibly complex argument about faith, justice, and sacrifice. So let's dive in. The story throws us right into the deep end with this line. It is bleak. And you might think, okay, that's just some tough guy dialogue, but no, this isn't a throwaway insult. This right here, this is the core idea of the entire text. I mean, think about it. The idea that letting someone live could be a punishment worse than death, that is some heavy, heavy stuff. And that's exactly the kind of territory we're getting into. So that's really the question we need to keep in our minds, right? Are we just reading a fun little interplanetary adventure? Or is this something much, much deeper, a foundational text even, on how justice can possibly exist in a cosmos that feels completely fallen? Every single thing that happens from this point forward, we've got to see it through that lens. Okay, so let's start with the foundational principles here, the axioms of this sacred mission. And it all starts with our protagonist, Ron Jordan. Now, it's so easy to just write him off as another standard sci-fi hero, But the text is really pushing us to see him as something more. He's not just a guy making choices. He's more like an agent of some divine will. He's on a mission that feels preordained. Think for a second about Jordan's whole disguise, the ragged clothes, the fake addiction, all that humiliation he puts himself through. You might think it's just, good spy work, but it's so much more than that. The text actually frames this as an act of kinosus, and that's a fancy theological term that means basically self-emptying. He's making a spiritual sacrifice. He has to give up his status, his dignity, to become lesser so he can get into the corrupt heart of Halo City and do something truly great. But why? Why is this mission necessary at all? Well, to really get a handle on Jordan's journey, we have to understand the world he's in. And believe me, it is a broken world. So that's what we're digging into next, this crisis of the cosmos, the whole moral and historical context that sets the stage for everything. This timeline really lays out how everything went so wrong. It all kicks off with the fall. But we're not talking about a garden here. We're talking about a courtroom, where Ron's brother, Carl, is sentenced for a crime he didn't commit. That single act shatters the covenant of justice. Then comes the law, this super rigid decree that just pours salt in the wound. That leads to the descent, where places like Halo City pop up, these totally lawless, godless places. And it all culminates in a prophecy of sorts. Our hero, waiting for a fated vessel. And what's the name of that ship? The Lucifer. Yeah, tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it? And right at the heart of this fallen world, you have the silicyte problem. Now, what are silicytes? They're these beings that consume metal. The text is clear, they're not sentient, they're not like us. But the great economic sin of this era is that they're being exploited. They're basically being used as disposable, soulless labor. And that raises a huge moral question, right? Even if something seems soulless, is it right to exploit it for your own gain? This is the deep, rotten injustice that everything else is built on. So, in a universe this corrupt, how in the world do you find salvation? This question brings us to the core doctrine of the whole story, what you could call just deception. The official term for this study of salvation is soteriology, and the answer this text provides is, well, it's pretty radical. It's not about being pure, it's not about being perfect. No, it says salvation comes from righteous cunning, from strategic suffering, all to achieve a just end. And Jordan's path to get there, it's laid out almost like a set of spiritual steps. First, he has to embrace the disguise, to look like a sinner. Second, he has to suffer passively, take the insults, and never let his pride get in the way. Third, and this is so crucial, he has to recognize the fated vessel, the Lucifer. He has to see its true purpose. And only then, only as a last resort, does he wield righteous violence, not for himself, but for the moral aim of saving his brother. And then we get this incredible moment of revelation. It's such a powerful image. Everyone else looks at this ship and they see a piece of junk called the Martian Belle. But Jordan, because his faith in his mission is so strong, he sees right through the fresh coat of paint. His flashlight picks out the old letters underneath. Lucifer. He knows he has to board this fallen vessel to achieve redemption. It's just a fantastic moment of pure spiritual insight. Okay, so Jordan gets on board the Lucifer, but as soon as he's on this fated ship, he comes face to face with a totally opposing worldview. You could even call it a heresy. And it's all embodied in one person, the antagonist, Tarnoff. So their conflict, it's not just two smugglers fighting over a score. It's a fundamental clash of doctrines, a schism playing out in the asteroid belt. And you can just see their two ethics laid out side by side. On one hand, you have Jordan, justice through cunning, violence only as a last resort, and ultimate sacrifice for another. And on the other hand, you have Tarnoff's heresy, profit through chaos, deception for personal gain, and self-preservation above absolutely everything else. He's just the perfect embodiment of cynical self-interest. Inevitably, this all comes to a head in the Vanith, which is a traditional Martian duel. And we have to be clear, this is not just a gunfight. It's a sacred ritual, a trial by combat. There is only a single bullet, which symbolizes the absolute finality of moral judgment. Winning the Vanith isn't about who has the faster hand. It's about who can prove, through faith and cunning, that their cause is the just one. And that duel, that brings us to our final section, the legacy of the Lucifer. Here, we're really getting into the story's eschatology. That's the part of theology that deals with the end times, with final judgment. And this duel, this is it. This is the final judgment, the ultimate test of faith. And it all hinges on this moment, Tarnoff's ultimate bluff. He looks Jordan in the eye and says, "The gun is rigged. Fire it, and you blast yourself, not me." This is the absolute test. Does Jordan listen to that voice of reason, of doubt, of self-preservation screaming in his head? Or does he trust his instinct, his unwavering faith that he is on the side of righteousness? And what does he do? He pulls the trigger. The text is so specific here. It calls it a purely instinctive action. This isn't a gamble. It's not a 50-50 shot. It's the physical result of his unwavering conviction. His faith is so total, so absolute, that it just steamrolls over rational doubt. And in that one moment, he exposes the heretic's bluff for the empty lie that it is. But, and this is the tragic twist, this isn't some clean, happy ending. Because in the chaos of that moment, the single piece of paper that could have saved his brother, the confession Tarnoff was holding, it gets jarred from his hand. And it just vanishes. A tiny puff of flame, and it's gone. The physical proof of justice, incinerated. All that's left is the memory of the act. And that's the final haunting thought experiment the text leaves us with. When a confession, the literal truth, is burned away in a rocket blast, what's left of justice? Does a righteous act even count if there's no proof it ever happened? The text seems to be hinting at something really challenging, that maybe, in a fallen cosmos, the only truth that really matters is the one held by the survivor. A deeply, deeply unsettling idea, but a powerful one. And just a quick reminder, this breakdown is for entertainment and educational purposes only.